Number 1. Soldier Sabrina D. Harman. Sabrina D. Harman was 25 years old when she deployed to Iraq in 2003 as a specialist in the U.S. Army Reserve. She served with the 372nd Military Police Company, a unit based in Cresaptown, Maryland. Harman joined the Army Reserve after the September 11, 2001 attacks, motivated by a desire to serve her country. Before her deployment, she worked as an assistant manager at a pizza restaurant in Virginia. Her unit's initial assignment in Iraq was peacekeeping in Hilla, where she reportedly maintained positive interactions with local civilians. However, in October 2003, the unit was reassigned to guard duties at Abu Ghraib prison, marking a turning point in her military service. At Abu Ghraib, she was initially assigned to guard female detainees in standard housing units. Within weeks, she was transferred to cell blocks controlled by military intelligence for the interrogation of suspected insurgents. She described being immediately disturbed by the treatment of detainees, many of whom were kept unclothed, handcuffed in stress positions, and subjected to sleep deprivation and humiliation. In one case, she observed a prisoner referred to as the taxi driver being kicked by an interpreter. She later documented the incident in letters sent to her partner, Kelly Bryant. During her time in the prison, she took photographs of detainees, some under orders and some of her own accord. She claimed the images were meant to document abuse she believed was being sanctioned by higher authorities. However, some photographs showed her posing and smiling beside detainees, including the infamous image of detainees stacked like a pyramid. Another widely circulated photo showed a hooded man standing on a box with wires attached to his arms. She later acknowledged that while he was not beaten, he wasn't allowed to sleep. In January 2004, specialist Joseph Darby reported the misconduct by submitting a CD of photos to the Army's Criminal Investigation Division. The images triggered a wide-ranging investigation. Harman, along with 6 other reservists, was charged with crimes related to detainee abuse. She faced multiple charges, including maltreatment of detainees, conspiracy to maltreat detainees, and dereliction of duty. During her hearing and court-martial, the prosecution argued that she had participated in and contributed to the cruel treatment of the detainees. Her defense maintained that Harman acted under the pressure of her environment, lacked proper training, and was scapegoated while higher-ranking officials escaped accountability. On May 17, 2005, she was convicted on 6 of 7 counts. She was sentenced to 6 months in prison, stripped of all pay and allowances, reduced in rank, and discharged on bad conduct from the U.S. Army. Following her sentencing, Harman publicly expressed remorse, though she continued to maintain that she never physically harmed any detainees. In an interview, she showed remorse, stating that she wished she could apologize to the Iraqi people. But she didn't think she did anything wrong, stating that she wasn't having any fun during the incidents, and she was completely detached from everything that was going on. In her letters to her friend, written while still deployed, she conveyed mental distress and a sense of helplessness. She said she took the photos to document what was happening, intending to release them to the media after leaving the military, believing that speaking out while still enlisted would bring her harm. She was confined at the Naval Consolidated Brig in Miramar, California. She received credit for time already served and was released after serving approximately 4 months. Number 2. Soldier Michael Behenna. Michael Behenna, who was 25 at the time of the incident, served as a first lieutenant in the United States Army. He was assigned to the 101st Airborne Division, specifically the 5th Platoon, Delta Company of the 1st Battalion, 327th Infantry Regiment. He joined the Army after completing his education at the University of Central Oklahoma. He was deployed to Iraq in 2007, where he led counterinsurgency operations in the Salahuddin province, focusing on towns such as Mesra, Hajjaj, and Butama. He was known for his efforts to engage with local Iraqis. Behenna encouraged cultural understanding among his platoon members. On April 21, 2008, Behenna's platoon was returning to their base with 2 detainees when their convoy was struck by an improvised explosive device. The attack resulted in the deaths of 2 soldiers, specialists Adam Cole-House and Stephen Christopherson, and left several others injured. This incident had a profound impact on Behenna. Subsequently, on May 5, 2008, acting on intelligence suggesting that a man known as Ali Mansour Mohammed was involved with al-Qaeda and possibly connected to the April 21 attack, Behenna's platoon detained Mansour during a raid in Butoma. They discovered weapons and documents linking him to Syria. Mansour was handed over to military intelligence for interrogation. However, due to insufficient evidence, he was ordered to be released. On May 16, 2008, while he was tasked with returning Mansour to his village, Behenna deviated from the direct route and stopped under a bridge near Baiji. Accompanied by his Iraqi interpreter, Behenna attempted an unauthorized interrogation of Mansour. During this encounter, he shot and murdered Mansour. The following day, Mansour's body was found by local villagers. Behenna was charged with premeditated murder, making false statements, and obstruction of justice. His court-martial began on February 23, 2009. The prosecution's key witnesses included the interpreter and Staff Sergeant Hal Warner, who testified that Behenna had taken Mansour under the bridge and shot him. The defense argued that Behenna acted in self-defense, claiming that Mansour had attacked him during the interrogation. On February 27, 2009, the military jury acquitted Behenna of premeditated murder, but convicted him of unpremeditated murder. He was sentenced to 25 years in prison. He was dishonorably discharged from the Army and incarcerated at the United States Disciplinary Barracks in Fort Leavenworth, Kansas. His legal team appealed the conviction, citing that the prosecution failed to disclose exculpatory evidence from a forensic expert supporting Behenna's self-defense claim. Despite these efforts, the appeal was denied. However, the Army Clemency and Parole Board later reduced his sentence to 15 years. He was granted parole and released on March 14, 2014, after serving less than 5 years. Throughout his incarceration, he maintained that he acted in self-defense. He expressed remorse for the incident and the impact it had on all parties involved. On May 6, 2019, President Donald Trump granted Behenna a full pardon, effectively clearing his record. Number 3. Soldier Bradley, Edward Manning. Edward Manning was a 22-year-old U.S. Army private first class assigned as an intelligence analyst to the 2nd Brigade Combat Team, 10th Mountain Division, stationed in Iraq in 2009. Manning had enlisted in the Army in 2007 and was trained at Fort Leonard Wood and Fort Huachuca. As part of his assignment, he was granted access to multiple classified military and diplomatic databases under the Secret Internet Protocol Router Network, which was used for the exchange of sensitive information. Between late 2009 and early 2010, Manning began extracting and leaking large quantities of classified material. He later told an acquaintance that the decision began after becoming disillusioned with certain military operations in Iraq. He used rewritable CDs, disguised as Lady Gaga music discs, to download and remove the data from his work environment. Among the leaked files were the collateral murder video from a 2007 Baghdad airstrike, a 2009 airstrike in Graner, Afghanistan, 251,087 diplomatic cables, and over 480,000 U.S. Army incident and field reports known as the Iraq War Logs and Afghan War Diary. The materials were passed to WikiLeaks, which began publishing them between April 2010 and April 2011. In May 2010, Manning reached out online to Adrian Lamo, a former hacker, and shared that he had been responsible for the leaks. Manning disclosed his identity, military role, and motivations during a series of online chats, indicating emotional stress and ethical concerns over U.S. military activities. He expressed a belief that the public deserved to see what he called the non-PR versions of global events. Lamo, after initial conversations, forwarded the chat logs and Manning's identity to Army Criminal Investigation Command. Shortly thereafter, Manning was arrested on May 27, 2010, in Iraq. Following his arrest, Manning was transferred to Camp Arifjan in Kuwait, and then to the Marine Corps Brig at Quantico, Virginia, in July 2010. While held at Quantico, he was placed under Prevention of Injury Watch, which included prolonged solitary confinement, limited access to personal belongings, and restrictions on physical movement. These conditions drew domestic and international criticism. In April 2011, he was transferred to the Midwest Joint Regional Correctional Facility at Fort Leavenworth, Kansas. Manning was formally charged with 22 offenses, including theft of public property or records, transmitting defense information, and aiding the enemy, the most serious charge, which carried a potential death sentence. In February 2013, he pleaded guilty to 10 lesser charges, stating that he had wanted to spark a debate about foreign policy and military ethics. The trial for the remaining charges began on June 3, 2013, at Fort Meade, Maryland. On July 30, 2013, he was convicted of 17 charges and amended versions of 4 others, but was acquitted of aiding the enemy. On August 21, 2013, he was sentenced to 35 years in prison and dishonorably discharged from the U.S. Army. He was also demoted to the rank of private and forfeited all pay and allowances. He was incarcerated at the U.S. Disciplinary Barracks at Fort Leavenworth, a maximum security military prison. Following sentencing, he issued a statement announcing her decision to transition and live as a woman, and changed his name to Chelsea Elizabeth Manning. He requested recognition of his gender identity and access to gender-affirming treatment while in custody. In subsequent interviews and written statements, Manning emphasized he believed that his actions were motivated by conscience rather than malice. He expressed regret for the unintended consequences of the disclosures, but remained committed to transparency. Manning served nearly 7 years in confinement, including pre-trial detention. On January 17, 2017, President Barack Obama commuted his sentence, citing the disproportionate length of her punishment compared to others convicted of similar offenses. He was released from Fort Leavenworth on May 17, 2017. After his release, he became involved in activism and public speaking. In 2018, he filed to run in the Democratic primary for the U.S. Senate in Maryland, but did not secure the nomination. Between March 2019 and March 2020, Manning was jailed again for contempt of court after refusing to testify before a grand jury investigating WikiLeaks and its founder, Julian Assange. He was held in the Alexandria Detention Center and fined $256,000 before his release. During various interviews and writings, Manning has reiterated her desire to promote transparency and accountability. Number 4. Soldier John E. Hatley. John E. Hatley was a U.S. Army First Sergeant assigned to Alpha Company, 1st Battalion, 18th Infantry Regiment, part of the 1st Infantry Division. At the time of the incident, he was in his early 40s and had served over 20 years in the military, having joined the Army in the late 1980s. Known for his leadership and experience, Hatley had previously completed multiple combat deployments and was respected among peers for his discipline and operational effectiveness. In March 2007, while deployed in Iraq during the surge, First Sergeant Hatley and several other soldiers detained 4 Iraqi men suspected of engaging in hostilities against U.S. forces. The men were taken into custody following a firefight in Baghdad. Due to insufficient evidence, the detainees were expected to be released from custody. According to later testimony, Hatley and other soldiers, including Sergeant First Class Joseph P. Mayo and Sergeant Michael P. Leahy Jr., decided to execute the detainees rather than allow them to go free. The 4 detainees were removed from a military vehicle, taken to a remote canal area near Baghdad, lined up, and shot multiple times. Their bodies were left in the canal and were never recovered. The incident remained undisclosed until 2008, when members of Hatley's unit, after returning to Germany, reported the incident to military authorities. This initiated a criminal investigation by the U.S. Army Criminal Investigation Command. Following the investigation, Hatley was charged with premeditated murder, conspiracy to commit premeditated murder, and obstruction of justice. The court-martial began in April 2009 at the U.S. Army's Rose Barracks in Vilseck, Germany. During the trial, several witnesses, including those involved in the incident, testified against Hatley. Sergeant Leahy and Sergeant Mayo had already pleaded guilty to similar charges and received lesser sentences in exchange for cooperation. Hatley was convicted of premeditated murder and other related offenses. On April 16, 2009, he was sentenced to life in prison with the possibility of parole. In addition to the prison sentence, Hatley was reduced in rank to private, stripped of all pay and allowances, and dishonorably discharged from the Army. His discharge formally ended his military career after more than 2 decades of service. Following his sentencing, he maintained a calm demeanor in court. He did not express visible emotion and made no immediate public statement. During the proceedings and in later appeals, he continued to assert his innocence, stating that he had not participated in the killings. He claimed that no bodies were ever found and argued that the case relied too heavily on conflicting testimonies from co-accused soldiers who had accepted plea deals. After sentencing, he was transferred to the United States Disciplinary Barracks at Fort Leavenworth, Kansas, a maximum security military prison. He began serving his sentence in 2009. Under military parole guidelines, prisoners serving life with the possibility of parole can become eligible for parole after serving 10 years. Hatley filed appeals in the years following his conviction, but his conviction and sentence were upheld. In interviews and written communications during his incarceration, Hatley continued to argue that he was made a scapegoat and that he had acted honorably in combat. After serving approximately 11 years at Fort Leavenworth, Hatley was granted parole in 2020. He was released from prison later that year. Number 5. Soldier Andrew Holmes. Andrew Holmes was a 19-year-old private first class in the United States Army, assigned to the 3rd Platoon Bravo Company, 2nd Battalion, 1st Infantry Regiment, which was part of the 5th Stryker Brigade Combat Team, 2nd Infantry Division. He enlisted in the Army after completing high school and deployed to Kandahar Province, Afghanistan, in 2009 during Operation Enduring Freedom. Holmes was one of the youngest members of his unit and had no prior disciplinary history before the events that would later lead to his arrest. On January 15, 2010, Holmes participated in an operation in the village of La Mohammed Kalai, Afghanistan. During this patrol, a group of soldiers encountered an unarmed 15-year-old Afghan civilian named Gul Muddin. According to Army investigators and subsequent testimony, Staff Sergeant Calvin Gibbs allegedly initiated a plan to shoot the civilian as part of an ongoing pattern of unlawful killings. Gibbs reportedly handed a grenade to another soldier, Corporal Jeremy Morlock, who threw it near the civilian. After the explosion, Holmes was instructed to fire his weapon. He complied and fired his machine firearm at Gul Muddin, leading to his death. After the shooting, the soldiers allegedly placed a weapon near the body to make the incident appear as a combat engagement. Photographs were later taken of Holmes posing with the body, which became part of the evidence used in subsequent legal proceedings. The incident was one of 3 civilian killings that occurred between January and May 2010. Other individuals involved in the case included Staff Sergeant Calvin Gibbs, Corporal Jeremy Morlock, Specialist Michael Wagnon, and Specialist Adam Winfield. These soldiers were later referred to collectively in the media and legal proceedings as members of the so-called Kill Team. Andrew Holmes was arrested in June 2010. He was initially charged with premeditated murder, conspiracy, and other related offenses. The most serious charges carried the possibility of life imprisonment. Holmes's defense team argued that he was following orders from his superior and lacked the maturity and judgment to refuse in a high-pressure combat environment. In 2011, as part of a plea agreement, Holmes pleaded guilty to murder by an inherently dangerous act, possession of a human body part, and the unlawful use of a controlled substance. The original charge of premeditated murder was dropped. Holmes admitted to firing on Gul Muddin and to posing for photos with the body. He was sentenced to 7 years in prison. During sentencing, Holmes was dishonorably discharged from the U.S. Army. He expressed regret for his actions, but did not deliver an extended public statement during the proceedings. After sentencing, he was transferred to the Naval Consolidated Brig Miramar in San Diego, California, to serve his prison term. While incarcerated, his legal team maintained that he had been manipulated by older, more experienced soldiers, particularly Gibbs and Morlock. Holmes's defense emphasized his age, limited experience, and the influence of command structure during deployment. He served approximately 4 years of his 7-year sentence. He was released from the Miramar facility in 2015 for good behavior and time served before trial. Number 6. Soldier Lynndie England. Lynndie England was a 21-year-old U.S. Army Reserve specialist. She joined the Army Reserve in 2001 while working in a chicken processing plant in Kaiser, West Virginia. At the time of her deployment to Iraq in 2003, she held the rank of Private First Class. Her unit was tasked with prison security and detainee handling at the Abu Ghraib prison complex near Baghdad. In late 2003, England's unit was reassigned to the night shift at Abu Ghraib's Tier 1A, a high-security wing where detainees were held for interrogation. Under pressure to assist military intelligence efforts, guards were instructed to soften up detainees before questioning. Over several weeks, England and other members of her unit were involved in acts of detainee mistreatment, often documented through photographs. Photographic evidence later surfaced showing her in multiple staged images. In one, she held a leash attached to a male detainee. In another, she pointed at the lower body parts of another, with a cigarette in her mouth. She was also photographed standing near a pyramid of detainees. These acts were not isolated. They occurred alongside similar conduct by other soldiers, including SPC Charles Graner Jr., Sergeant Ivan Frederick, and Soldier Sabrina Harman. SPC Joseph Darby, another member of the unit, discovered the photographs on a CD and submitted them to Army investigators in January 2004. An internal Army investigation was launched, known as the Taguba Report, which documented numerous violations of the Geneva Conventions. England was implicated along with several others. The photographs became public in April 2004, prompting international condemnation. She was charged with multiple offenses under the Uniform Code of Military Justice, including conspiracy, maltreatment of detainees, and committing indecent acts. Her initial plea agreement in 2004 was withdrawn when the presiding judge questioned whether she fully accepted responsibility. A general court-martial followed in September 2005 at Fort Hood, Texas. Few days later, she was convicted on 6 of 7 counts related to detainee mistreatment. A military jury of 5 officers sentenced her to 36 months of confinement. The prosecution had requested a sentence of 4 to 6 years, while the defense asked for no jail time. She was also dishonorably discharged from the U.S. Army Reserve. During sentencing, England sat quietly, at times looking down, but showed little visible emotion. Following the verdict, she was placed in restraints and led out of the courtroom. She spent brief time with her infant son before being transferred into military custody. In court, England testified that she participated in the abuse under the influence of SPC Charles Graner, with whom she was romantically involved. She described him as manipulative and claimed she had participated in the photographs to please him, stating that she was used by Private Graner and she didn't realize it at the time. She stated that her actions were not motivated by cruelty, but by misplaced loyalty and trust. Her defense team presented expert testimony describing her as overly compliant and vulnerable to authority figures. They also highlighted the lack of command oversight at the facility. Graner, who was later sentenced to 10 years in prison, supported claims that military intelligence officers were present during some of the acts and gave implicit orders. England apologized to the detainees and their families, as well as to U.S. troops who may have been endangered by the payback attacks linked to the images. She began her sentence at the Naval Consolidated Brig Miramar in San Diego, California, in 2005. She served approximately 17 months of her 36-month sentence. She was released on parole for good behavior. After her release, she gave limited interviews. In them, she maintained that she had been manipulated and made a scapegoat for systemic failures at Abu Ghraib. She expressed embarrassment over the photographs and regret for her involvement, but continued to blame the media for the widespread fallout, suggesting that the extensive coverage of the photographs exacerbated the situation and led to increased violence against U.S. troops in Iraq. She stated, "If the media hadn't exposed the pictures to that extent, then thousands of lives would have been saved." Her final public statement regarding the case emphasized that while she accepted responsibility, she believed she had been part of a broader institutional breakdown. She recounted instances where members of the CIA and FBI allegedly endorsed the mistreatment, stating that they fully gave them the go-ahead orders to continue with the act. Number 7. Soldier Clint Allen Lorance. Clint Allen Lorance was born in Hobart, Oklahoma. He enlisted in the U.S. Army on his 18th birthday in 2002. His early military service included a 2-year assignment in South Korea as a traffic officer, followed by a 15-month deployment in Iraq, guarding detainees. After completing his bachelor's degree at the University of North Texas in 2010, Lorance was commissioned as a second lieutenant and later promoted to first lieutenant. In March 2012, he was deployed to southern Afghanistan with the 4th Brigade Combat Team, 73rd Cavalry Regiment of the 82nd Airborne Division. How deployment to Afghanistan was marked by significant tension. In a short period, he became the leader of 1st Platoon, C Troop, after the previous lieutenant was injured. During this time, his leadership tactics began to raise concerns among some of his soldiers. On July 2, 2012, Lawrence's platoon went on a routine patrol in the Jari district of Kandahar province. This area was known to be under the control of the Taliban. During the patrol, Lawrence's soldiers encountered 3 Afghan men riding a motorcycle. The men were seen moving near the patrol, and Lorance believed they posed a threat, suspecting them of being insurgents. There were conflicting reports about the nature of the threat. Some soldiers testified that the men were at least 600 feet away and posed no immediate danger. Others, including Lorance, believed the men were approaching in a hostile manner. He issued the order to fire on the men. Initially, one of his soldiers missed, and the 3 men dismounted and approached Afghan National Army soldiers who were positioned at the front of the patrol. The 3 men were unarmed, and their hands were visible. After a brief exchange, the Afghan soldiers gestured for the men to leave. The men turned around and began to walk away, but he then ordered a second soldier to fire. 2 of the Afghan men were shot, while the 3rd managed to escape. The incident quickly raised alarms among his own platoon. Sergeant Williams, a squad leader, radioed confusion and disbelief, stating there was no visible threat. Lorance initially expressed approval of the action. He later defended his decision, stating that, given the situation on the ground, he would make the same choice again if faced with a similar scenario. The shooting of the unarmed men triggered an investigation. In the months following the incident, several soldiers in Lawrence's platoon came forward, testifying against him. The legal proceedings resulted in a court-martial at Fort Bragg, North Carolina, in August 2013. Lorance was charged with 2 counts of second-degree murder, obstruction of justice, and additional charges related to his conduct as a platoon leader. Despite the defense's argument that Lorance acted based on the intelligence and threat assessments available at the time, the court found him guilty. The judge sentenced him to 20 years in prison, stripped of all pay, and dismissed from the Army. This conviction was based on the assertion that his actions violated military conduct and were not justified by the threat assessment he had received. The trial and sentencing drew significant attention, particularly among those who felt the actions taken by Lorance were misunderstood or driven by incomplete information about the context of the situation. Following the conviction, Lorance maintained that he made the best decision possible given the circumstances. He refused to testify during the court-martial, but did express responsibility for his men's actions. His legal team pursued multiple appeals, arguing that evidence linking the deceased men to insurgent activities had been excluded from the trial. These appeals were unsuccessful, and Lorance's conviction was upheld. In December 2014, Lorance's legal team filed a petition claiming prosecutorial misconduct, but in January 2015, a review by the 82nd Airborne Division upheld the original conviction, though a year was reduced from his sentence due to post-trial delays. In September 2015, a petition for a new trial was filed, highlighting new evidence about the men who were shot. According to the petition, one of the men had been linked to previous insurgent activity. However, the Army Court of Criminal Appeals rejected the petition in June 2017, ruling that the new evidence would not have influenced the outcome of the trial. Lorance's case gained widespread media attention, especially among conservative circles, and debates surrounding the fairness of his conviction continued to grow. In 2019, following years of public advocacy and legal challenges, President Donald Trump granted Lorance a full pardon. The pardon led to Lorance's release from the United States Disciplinary Barracks at Fort Leavenworth, where he had served 6 years of his 20-year sentence. After his release, Lorance expressed gratitude for the pardon and stated that he intended to pursue a career in law and continue advocating for the fair treatment of soldiers in similar situations. Number 8. Staff Sergeant Ivan L. Frederick. Ivan L. Frederick, also known as Chip, was a 38-year-old U.S. Army reservist from Buckingham, Virginia, at the time of his conviction in 2004. He served in the 372nd Military Police Company, a unit of the Army Reserve. Prior to his deployment to Iraq, Frederick had 18 years of military experience, including active duty and reserve service. In 2003, he was deployed to Iraq and assigned to the Abu Ghraib prison near Baghdad, where he served as a night shift supervisor overseeing military police operations. Between October and December 2003, Frederick participated in and supervised the mistreatment of detainees at Abu Ghraib. The abuses included physical assaults, humiliation, and psychological torment. Specific acts involved detainees being forced into stress positions, stripped, and subjected to mock executions. He admitted to placing wires on a detainee to simulate electrocution and to posing for photographs with half-clothed detainees. These actions were documented in photographs taken by the soldiers. In late 2003 and early 2004, the photographs of detainee abuse were discovered by the U.S. military and later leaked to the media. In some of the images, detainees were shackled in stress positions, hooded, and made to strip. Other images showed abuse in the form of physical violence and forced participation in demeaning acts. This prompted an internal investigation led by Major General Antonio Taguba, who concluded that there were numerous instances of sadistic, blatant, and wanton criminal abuses at the prison. The investigation identified several other soldiers, including Frederick, as responsible for the misconduct. He was charged with multiple offenses under the Uniform Code of Military Justice. He pleaded guilty to several charges in a general court-martial held in Baghdad in October 2004. The military judge sentenced him to 8 years in prison, reduction in rank to private, forfeiture of pay, and a dishonorable discharge from the Army. Frederick's attorney described the sentence as excessive. He served part of his sentence at the United States Disciplinary Barracks at Fort Leavenworth, Kansas, one of the most well-known military prisons in the country. He was incarcerated there for several years as part of his 8-year sentence. During his time in prison, his case continued to be a subject of public debate, with some believing that his sentence was too harsh given the lack of accountability for higher-ranking individuals who were allegedly responsible for creating the conditions that led to the abuse. In 2007, his sentence was reduced to 7 years. His final release date was set for 2011 after serving 4 years of his reduced sentence. Number 9. Soldier Adam Winfield. Adam Winfield was a 21-year-old U.S. Army specialist assigned to the 3rd Platoon, Bravo Company, 2nd Battalion, 1st Infantry Regiment, part of the 5th Stryker Brigade Combat Team, 2nd Infantry Division. He enlisted in the Army shortly after high school, influenced by his father, a retired Marine. Winfield deployed to Kandahar Province, Afghanistan, in 2009 during Operation Enduring Freedom. During his deployment, Winfield became part of a unit later implicated in what became known as the Maiwand District murders. Between January and May 2010, members of the unit were involved in the premeditated murder of unarmed Afghan civilians. These incidents were carried out under the leadership of Staff Sergeant Calvin Gibbs, who allegedly encouraged and organized the acts. Other soldiers implicated included Corporal Jeremy Morlock, Specialist Michael Wagnon, and Private First Class Andrew Holmes. On May 2, 2010, the third and final shooting took place in the village of Qualiday. According to Army investigators, the group targeted an unarmed man, later identified as Mullah Adadad. Staff Sergeant Gibbs allegedly initiated the plan. Morlock threw a grenade, and other soldiers, including Holmes, opened fire. Winfield, under pressure and fearing for his safety, discharged his weapon, but later maintained he did not fire at the victim. A weapon was planted on the body to falsely indicate hostile intent. Before this incident, Winfield had communicated with his father via social media platforms, expressing concerns about unlawful shootings in his unit. He stated he felt unsafe and powerless to intervene. His father attempted to report this to Army authorities, but was unsuccessful in getting an investigation launched in time. In June 2010, the Army launched a criminal investigation following reports from within the unit and from photographs that surfaced. Winfield was arrested and charged with premeditated murder, conspiracy, and other related offenses. The maximum penalty for the original charges was life in prison without the possibility of parole. Winfield's legal team argued that he had made efforts to report the incidents and that he acted under duress during the shooting. On August 5, 2011, at a court-martial held at Joint Base Lewis McChord in Washington State, Winfield accepted a plea agreement. He pleaded guilty to involuntary manslaughter and the use of illegal controlled substances. As part of the agreement, the charge of premeditated murder was dropped, and he was sentenced to 3 years in prison. During sentencing, Winfield acknowledged his failure to act. In his statement, he said, "It is my duty as an American soldier to protect any detainee that is in the custody of U.S. personnel. It was my job to do that, sir, and I failed to do it." He added, "Had I done my duty, then it would not have happened. He wouldn't be dead." Following sentencing, Winfield was given a bad conduct discharge from the U.S. Army. He was transferred to the Naval Consolidated Brig Miramar in California to serve his sentence. He received credit for time served while awaiting trial. While incarcerated, he cooperated with military prosecutors, providing testimony against other members of the unit, including Staff Sergeant Gibbs, who was later convicted and sentenced to life in prison. Winfield's testimony was considered valuable due to his early attempts to expose the conduct and his relatively limited role in the killings. Winfield served approximately 16 months of his 3-year sentence. He was released on parole from the Miramar facility in August 2012. After his release, he maintained a low public profile but participated in interviews and a documentary, The Kill Team, where he shared his account of events. He reiterated that he had attempted to report the killings but was unable to do so through official channels. He also stated that he feared for his life due to the power dynamics in the unit. Number 10. Justin Robert Fisher. Justin Robert Fisher, who was 25 at the time of the incident, served as a specialist in the U.S. Army's 2nd Battalion, 502nd Infantry Regiment, part of the 101st Airborne Division stationed at Fort Campbell, Kentucky. He enlisted in the Army in the mid-1990s and was assigned as a roommate to Private First Class Barry Winchell. In the summer of 1999, Fisher and Winchell often visited local establishments, including a Nashville club featuring trans performers. During one visit, Winchell met Calpurnia Adams, a trans woman, and they began a relationship. Fisher reportedly spread rumors about this relationship among fellow soldiers, leading to increased harassment of Winchell. On July 4, 1999, after a day of drinking, Winchell and Private Calvin Glover engaged in a physical altercation, resulting in Glover's defeat. Fisher allegedly taunted Glover about the loss, emphasizing that he was beaten by someone perceived as not straight. In the early hours of July 5th, Glover retrieved a baseball bat from Fisher's locker and struck Winchell while he slept in their barracks. He was taken to the hospital, but he died to his injuries on July 6th at Vanderbilt University Medical Center. Following the incident, Fisher was taken in and was charged with multiple offenses, including being an accessory to premeditated murder, obstruction of justice, providing drinks to a minor, and false swearing. In a plea agreement, Fisher pleaded guilty to some of the charges. Charges related to murder were dropped. He was sentenced to 12.5 years in prison, dishonorably discharged, reduced in rank to a private, and ordered to forfeit all pay and benefits. During sentencing, Fisher expressed remorse. He called out the name of the victim and said he was sorry that if he could go back to change things that he would. Fisher served his sentence at the United States Disciplinary Barracks at Fort Leavenworth, Kansas. He was denied clemency in 2003, but was released to a halfway house in August 2006 and fully released from custody in October 2006 after serving approximately 7 years. Number 11. Soldier. Charles Graner. Charles Graner was a United States Army Reserve specialist who served with the 372nd Military Police Company. At the time of the events in question, he was in his mid-30s. Graner joined the military in the late 1980s and served intermittently as a reservist. He was deployed to Iraq during the U.S. occupation and assigned to Abu Ghraib prison near Baghdad. He held the rank of specialist during his deployment. In late 2003, while serving at the Abu Ghraib detention facility, he became involved in the abuse of Iraqi detainees. The prison, under U.S. control, was used to house individuals suspected of insurgent activity or affiliation with enemy forces. The environment at Abu Ghraib was marked by overcrowding, confusion in detainee classification, and poor oversight. Graner, along with other soldiers, including Lynndie England, Ivan Frederick, Sabrina Harman, and Megan Ambule, participated in the mistreatment of prisoners. The sequence of events leading to the scandal began between October and December 2003. During this time, military police were documented physically abusing detainees. Photos later revealed showed detainees forced into stress positions, stacked in pyramids, subjected to simulated electrocution, and made to wear hoods or women's underpants. Graner appeared in several of the photographs and was identified as a leading figure in the incidents. According to testimonies and photographic evidence, he beat detainees, encouraged others to participate in humiliating acts, and reportedly posed smiling next to the abused prisoners. One image showed him over the body of Manadel al-Jamadi, a detainee who died in custody. An autopsy later found the cause of death to be a blood clot from trauma. Graner was also romantically linked with Lynndie England, a fellow soldier at the facility. She later gave birth to a child reported to be his. Their relationship was cited in trial proceedings and media reports, but had no direct impact on the legal judgment. The detainees involved in the abuse were not publicly named, and some remained unidentified due to the conditions of their confinement and status within the intelligence framework. In 2004, after an internal Army investigation, The abuses at Abu Ghraib were formally documented in the Taguba Report, led by Major General Antonio Taguba. The investigation named Graner as the primary instigator of the misconduct. He was charged with multiple offenses under the Uniform Code of Military Justice, including conspiracy, assault, maltreatment of detainees, dereliction of duty, and indecent acts. Graner's court-martial took place in January 2005 at Fort Hood, Texas. The trial included testimony from his co-defendants and witnesses, as well as the presentation of extensive photographic and video evidence. Graner pleaded not guilty, asserting that he had been following orders from military intelligence officers who allegedly encouraged aggressive tactics to extract information. His defense maintained that he was operating within what he understood to be approved procedures. The jury found him guilty on 10 of 13 counts. He was sentenced to 10 years in prison and dishonorably discharged from the U.S. Army. The court also reduced his rank to private and ordered a forfeiture of pay and allowances. He showed little emotion during sentencing. Following the verdict, he was transferred to the United States Disciplinary Barracks at Fort Leavenworth, Kansas. He did not publicly express remorse during the trial, though he reiterated his claim that his actions were carried out under instruction or without clear prohibition. After sentencing, he declined media interviews and maintained a low profile while serving his sentence. His legal team did not win any significant appeal or sentence reduction, and his conviction remained upheld. He served more than 6 years of his 10-year sentence. In August 2011, he was released early for good behavior and time served prior to sentencing. Number 12. Soldier Derrick Miller. Derrick Miller was a U.S. Army National Guardsman who served as a staff sergeant with the 116th Infantry Brigade Combat Team, a component of the Maryland Army National Guard. He was 28 years old at the time of the incident in question. Miller had joined the U.S. Army in the early 2000s and completed multiple overseas deployments, including to Iraq and Afghanistan. He was known as a dedicated soldier with combat experience, having participated in several missions over the course of his military service. The incident involving Derrick Miller took place on September 26, 2010, in a village within the Laghman province of eastern Afghanistan. During a combat patrol operation near a forward operating base, U.S. forces apprehended an Afghan man named Atta Mohammed. The man had reportedly entered the U.S. security perimeter under suspicious circumstances. According to military reports, soldiers noticed inconsistencies in Mohammed's account of his presence in the area. He had claimed to be delivering supplies to his family, but the route he took and the timing raised concerns. Miller volunteered to interrogate Mohammed. During the questioning, which took place in a temporary holding area within the perimeter, he accused Mohammed of lying and suspected him of being an enemy combatant or a spy for insurgents. He alleged that Mohammed had given conflicting stories and may have been scouting for an impending attack against the unit. Miller later claimed that during the interrogation, he believed Mohammed attempted to grab his weapon or lunge toward him, prompting him to shoot him at close range. 2 other U.S. soldiers were present near the scene at the time of the shooting. One of them testified that he saw Derrick Miller straddling the Afghan man before firing his weapon. Another soldier stated that the situation had been tense, but did not support the claim that Mohammed posed a direct threat at the time of the shooting. Following the incident, Atta Mohammed's body was removed and buried by local villagers. The U.S. Army launched an immediate investigation. Derrick Miller was arrested and charged with premeditated murder under the Uniform Code of Military Justice. His court-martial took place in 2011 at Joint Base Balad in Iraq. Prosecutors argued that he had acted outside the rules of engagement and that the killing was not justified by any imminent threat. The prosecution emphasized that the victim was unarmed and that the circumstances did not warrant the use of lethal force. The defense argued that Miller believed Mohammed was an insurgent and posed a threat to U.S. troops, citing the soldier's experience and judgment in high-risk combat zones. In July 2011, Miller was found guilty of premeditated murder by a military panel. He was sentenced to life in prison with the possibility of parole. Following his conviction, he was dishonorably discharged from the U.S. Army. The dishonorable discharge stripped him of all military benefits. He was transferred to the United States Disciplinary Barracks at Fort Leavenworth, Kansas, where he began serving his sentence. Miller and his legal team appealed the conviction, arguing that his actions were consistent with the chaotic environment of combat and that he had made a judgment call under pressure. The case drew attention from several military advocacy groups who campaigned for his release, asserting that he had been unfairly punished for making a decision in a combat zone. In 2018, following a review of the case and lobbying by various supporters and lawmakers, his sentence was reduced from life to 20 years by the U.S. Army's Clemency and Parole Board. This reduction allowed him to become eligible for parole after serving a portion of his sentence. He was released on parole in May 2019 after serving approximately 8 years in confinement. During his incarceration, he reportedly maintained good conduct and was considered a low-risk prisoner. After his release, he publicly maintained that his actions were driven by the necessity to protect his unit. He stated that he acted on instinct and training, believing that the detainee posed a credible threat. He expressed frustration with the nature of modern warfare, where combatants blend with civilian populations, making split-second decisions especially complex for frontline troops. He served his sentence at the United States Disciplinary Barracks in Fort Leavenworth, Kansas, from 2011 to 2019. Thank you guys for watching till the end. What country or state are you watching from? Do you think these former soldiers deserve to be released from prison given the nature of crime they committed? Leave a comment below.